When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to anfieldindexpro.com and get started today.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters for Anfield Index. Ladies and gents, that is Jurgen Klopp's last away game finished. There's only one left, the final home game of the season against Wolves. And I'll tell you what, last night, exciting probably if you're a neutral. People are taking it in different ways, but we'll discuss that. We'll discuss all the things happening off the pitch, which is eventful as ever at Liverpool Football Club. We'll talk about the upcoming week, and we'll talk about the questions from viewers. And who here better to talk about it as ever? The renowned and the respected David Lynch. So, David, we're pretty much near the season's end now. There's only a couple of these left, isn't there, left to go?
Yeah, it seems kind of mad, doesn't it? Because when we were obviously the news came out about Klopp leaving, it felt like a million miles away still. Liverpool in the title race at that point, so much to sort of look forward to. And now, yeah, we're closing in on the end, and obviously the season's not kind of panned out how we hoped entirely, but it's still been pretty decent. And so I think, I think people need to shake off some of the negativity that's around it as well. That the kind of, going into Sunday, I think it should be a joyous occasion. This has been a decent season after an unbelievable era with a great charismatic leader, and I think everyone needs to sort of get the focus on that, because I think in the aftermath of yesterday's performance, it's been a little bit of negativity creeping in, or this needs to happen in some blah blah blah, and it's like, well, doesn't really matter at the moment, does it? And I think the main focus should be, and I think you could really actually see this at the end of yesterday's game, is it's on the man who's leaving, that, Jurgen Klopp, and who's an absolute Liverpool legend. And so, yeah, only one more game to go, which seems absolutely crazy. And yeah, we're nearly there.
We are. And I mean, speaking of crazy, 3-3. It was a basketball game really at times, wasn't it? I mean, your overall thoughts on the game, did it almost feel like, as a good analogy for the season, there was attack, good. There was defence, bad. There was entertainment. There was things happening. Like, you couldn't take your eyes off it. Was it a fair analogy for this season, do you think?
Yeah, I think it was kind of the season in a nutshell, really, wasn't it? In terms of Liverpool have never really, through most of the season, looked to massively control games. And it's really come to the fore recently, as I think a bit of fatigue has crept in. And I mean, the thing is, Jurgen Klopp will say, look, my approach has been justified because look at the league position compared to last season, the amount of points we picked up. We were in the title race until quite close to the end. We've won a trophy, went close in the Europa League. So he'll say he justified it. And it's hard to disagree with that. And in fact, Liverpool get themselves 3-1 up in a game against, probably the fourth best team in England this season. A difficult place to go against a really canny manager and a really good side. So, you can see that risk rewards there. And for a lot of this season, Liverpool have stayed on the reward side rather than the risk, and sort of got away with it a lot of times. And I say got away with it, that makes it seem like it's a flawed plan. I think it's a gamble that was worth taking, and it's been proven as such. But you've really had it hammered home in recent weeks, and definitely in the second half yesterday, that there is a downside there sometimes if you don't control games. That there can be moments like that finish to the game where Aston Villa steal a point, and it has been a gamble the manager's taken. I don't argue with the sort of the justification for that. But like I say, I think we saw really that there is downside, and that it's just been really, really emphasised and punched home in recent weeks. And that was just another sort of version of it yesterday, really.
Yeah, even the equaliser, I think, which flips off Duran, doesn't it? It's not even a pass for him. It just sort of bounces off him and over Alisson. Yeah, maybe just summed up all the punches in the gut that we've taken recently. I mean, this one, I'm still struggling to sort of, when I pick it up, we scored 3 goals and it should be, you've seen positive bits of play, but I was struggling to give everyone like, I wasn't really looking going, oh, he got an 8, he was a 9. Who did you give man of the match to when you analysed this?
To be honest, I'm not really sure. I think it's kind of a weird one because I went through the individual performances after the game and was kind of like, I didn't think, for example, the centre halves played badly in a game where Liverpool conceded 3. I don't really think Alisson's to blame for any of the goals. I think the forwards did okay with when they had the ball. They did okay with it and they offered threat and they were dangerous. Played some decent football going forward. So I think there were a few sort of no 8s, like you say, no one absolutely outstanding, but a few decent performances in there, I thought. But I think the biggest problem was in the entire game really was the lack of control in midfield, and that, as I say, has been a bit of a theme, hasn't it, for Liverpool at times, and particularly exacerbated recently. But I think there were generally quite some decent performances in there, despite the fact it ends in the way it does. But I just think there were a few subpar in certain elements in midfield, and that was Liverpool's biggest issue because it allowed Villa to keep going. But I think it's kind of, we focus on the individuals, but actually kind of think and you look around, say the goals, for example, and McAllister will rightly get criticism around, basically all 3 of them really, but particularly 2, and he will rightly be criticised. But I think I think it's worth noting that as much as individuals are to blame in certain situations, that I think you really saw underlined that the approach is sometimes to blame, and it really emphasised to me yesterday. So the moment I picked out, I tweeted about this so people might have seen it, but the moment I picked out is when Villa scored the goal for the equaliser. It's Liverpool are 1-0 up, it's like 11 minutes on the clock or whatever. And the ball, they win the ball in midfield, they have defensive numbers over Villa, and they're in a really good position. The ball breaks to McAllister, and he turns around in absolutely acres of space and tries to fire through past Douglas Luiz and then in between Torres and Digne. So there's a big enough space for him to play the ball into, but the fact that Luiz that is there makes it basically impossible. And he tries a first-time pass to fire it in to win the game basically in the 11th minute. Villa turn the ball over, and literally 4 seconds later, Watkins has got Quansah in the box 1v1. That to me is, yes, that's an individual error, but that says to me that the approach is always, right, let's go forward, let's not think about it. And that really sort of summed up a lot of Liverpool's problems for me. And that's why I think sort of there were actually some decent individual performances in there yesterday, sort of as a whole, really. Yes, a couple of poor ones, but I just think so many of the problems are down to approach. Why is McAllister being so aggressive in that situation, trying to thread an eye of a needle pass at 1-0 up after 11 minutes at a tough place to go? You just don't need to do it. And I think if it was Arsenal and Manchester City, that wouldn't be what they would do. What they would do is McAllister would turn there, he'd probably drive forward a little bit more and then feed Elliott out on the right and then wait basically so Liverpool can get the centre halves up to the halfway line or a little bit further on than that, pen Aston Villa in, keep moving the ball, keep circulating the ball, and then wait to play the killer pass when you've got them penned in and you're in a really good position to counter press. Liverpool were trying to kill them when they weren't in position to counter press, and they ended up with the ball in their box and then in the back of the net after about 10 seconds of winning a turnover in midfield. And I think that's the downside of the risk reward. And I think as much as we focus on individuals at times, I think the collective and the instructions to the manager there, this was very much a game where you saw the downsides of that. And so it's why there were some decent individual performances in there, even though it's a disappointing result and disappointing performance as a whole, is because I think what they were being asked to do was probably the wrong thing. And I think it also, I'm going really deep into this, but I think it also opens up questions about what's the first thing that Arne Slot can solve. And I think it's control, because this isn't that your defenders are absolutely terrible or your midfield has to be completely open. It's tactics. This is the approach. And I think if you're slightly more controlled in your attack, then you stop those situations that were happening yesterday, and you can it's a better way of winning games, because Arsenal and Manchester City have shown that control in the tactical sort of framework that we exist in at the moment, that the landscape as it is a better thing to prioritise than chaos.
It is, yeah. I think you're right. I was watching that at parts last night and thinking, because they've had a long time on the training ground for these recent games as well. It clearly is the approach, and it just when it goes well, it looks great, but when it doesn't, it looks kamikaze almost at times, the way we open up and play. But there we go.
To be honest, the trade-off would have been interesting if Liverpool had finished better as well. So if Liverpool were this completely gung-ho and they got Jota on the pitch more frequently, and Diaz and Núñez had finished better than they have this season, then again, it possibly might tip the scales in favour of the risk being worth it. But with the way they finished this season, some of the moments yesterday, I think that Diaz header from really close range kind of sums up some of the misses this season still. This is a game they scored 3. They could have won it 5-3 if the finishing had been slightly better, if it had been almost a Suarez and Sturridge type finishing season. But as it is, they've wasted chances and kept teams in games because of the way they approach things. And it's, as I say, the risk reward just hasn't quite paid off in the way they'd hope.
Yeah, indeed. And I do try and look for some positives, because there were, like you said, there's probably no one going for sort of high 8s or 9s, but there were some good contributions. Probably no more so than Cody Gakpo. I mean, he keeps that another goal, I say a tidy finish, but maybe more of a poacher style finish, which was nice to see. That takes him to 17 for the season, which isn't a bad haul for a derided figure, is it?
Absolutely. And again, I feel like we talk about this a lot, but he's essentially has been for much of the season Liverpool's 5th choice forward. He's played in midfield, and so to put up those numbers and a decent amount of assists as well. He's just a really good player, and I really like him. So I think he could have a really big role to play under Slot. I think there's an argument that he should be first choice ahead of Núñez going into next season, which is. That might seem surprising when you think about the numbers in terms of the figures that were paid for both of them. But I think even going into this season, that Gakpo was ahead of Núñez in the pecking order, and kind of rightly so. So, I don't think that's too crazy a shout. And I think the way he's finishing this season, he'll be bouncing into the next one. And, I thought he was kind of a little bit quiet yesterday. But again, it was because of Liverpool's lack of control, really. I thought all the forwards didn't get enough opportunities to keep the ball around the box and be really dangerous. But I thought everything he did with decent quality. Gets another goal, as you say. So yeah, really good finish to the season for him, and I think that bodes well for him with the Dutch coach coming in, who will have a good idea of what his game's like already, having watched him in the Eredivisie.
He was almost the story of the season. I mean, it's a good goal. He linked up well for it in the move, and then there were a couple of times he just made some strange decisions in true Liverpool forward style as well. But yeah. Maybe one in a way that doesn't want the season to end with his current form. And another, to be fair, he's in the team. It's another start, and it's another goal contribution for Harvey Elliott again. I mean, he is there right now on merit, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. He's playing really well. And I think, he also forces the goal from Martinez, doesn't he, in terms of he's the one making the run in behind. And his numbers in terms of assists and chances created over the last few weeks have been really, really good. He absolutely deserves to be starting ahead of Szoboszlai on that front. And, this has been a really, really good season for him, hasn't it, in terms of his development. Played a lot of football, learnt a lot, had some really big moments as well. So, again, he's another one. He's playing himself into a position where the new manager is going to come in. He will absolutely be watching these games. He knows what's coming, and he wants to get an idea of what the players are like. So he'll be watching these games and thinking, Elliott, he's got to be on the team sheet for me somehow. And I think one thing I would say is you also saw his weaknesses in this game, that maybe, he can get away with them in certain games, but not in this one. So Aston Villa are quite physical, aren't they? A big side. Didn't do enough in the defensive aspects of his work. But again, I think so much of that, I'm talking about individual weaknesses around Harvey Elliott, but so much around that is that basically, okay, how can Harvey Elliott fit into this crazy sort of style of football we're playing, rather than saying, how do we get the best out of him? How do we get the best out of certain players? So I think he wins sort of 1 out of 3 ground duels, maybe 0 out of 1 tackles. And so, those aren't great defensive numbers, but equally, I kind of think, it shouldn't be impossible to put Harvey Elliott in your midfield. It shouldn't have to be having Jordan Henderson in that position or someone of a similar profile in there. You should be able to have a footballer in there. I mean, the one player I always think he should be aiming to absolutely sort of emulate is Bernardo Silva at Man City. Now, they don't get run over in midfield when they have him there. And that is not just because Rodri's an absolute class act behind him, by the way, even though he absolutely is. It's because they're set up in a way that they're not creating turnovers all the time. They're very careful with the ball. They're not putting Bernardo Silva in a situation where he's defending 1v1 and he's getting muscled off the ball by someone who's twice as big as him. They're very similar build, similar pace-wise, similar quality, I think. I think Elliott is genuinely that good. So, for me, if Liverpool set up in the right way in midfield and they're a bit more patient in the play, a bit more careful, a little bit more cautious, as boring as it sounds, I think you can leave Elliott in that midfield position and you won't be asking him to do much defensive work outside of pinning teams in. So the first press kind of thing, rather than, basically being run at and trying to be a defensive midfielder, which he just doesn't have in his locker. And it's not a criticism of him. That is his profile. Liverpool need to sort of do more to look after that almost and be careful around him. So I think that's an important thing to think about going forward, because I don't think he should be criticised for sort of those elements of his game, because that's just not the player he is. He can be a Bernardo Silva for Liverpool. So how do you create that sort of tactical framework for him? That's something I want to see the new manager kind of solve.
Yeah, because it almost felt like he was being criticised, understandably, for what we know are deficiencies in his game. I mean, as soon as the game's behind McAllister and Elliott, they're going to struggle, aren't they? They've not got that physicality, but then again, they've been asked to set up that way, and that's what it is. And
this is it. So how often do you ever see the game get behind the Bernardo Silva or De Bruyne? If it was frequently happening, they would look a mess because they're not good at that. So what City do is they don't take risks until they've got the opposition penned into their own box, and they circulate the ball there. And if the ball does break, it's not a defensive situation, it's a pressing situation. Now that's where Elliott can be handy. That's where Bernardo Silva can be handy for City. When you're just in a pressing situation rather than a defensive situation. So yeah, I think that's something that the new manager has to really think about.
Will be interesting. And speaking of another youngster who had a really mixed night, we hit a peak and a trough, didn't we, for Jarell Quansah? I mean, that first goal, Ollie Watkins does go past him. You think he should do better, but it's a brilliant header, to be fair, at the same time. He's actually had a few from set pieces as well, but a good learning experience, would you say, for him overall?
Again, this is one I'm going to just keep banging on about this now, about the system and players not being set up to exceed or excel. Sorry, and I think again Quansah gets done with this. So I think how many centre halves is Ollie Watkins going to stand up in the box and not beat in the Premier League? I think there's very few. I think Van Dijk's very good in those situations. Then outside of that, kind of who's a really good 1v1 defender, who's a centre back. I'm thinking, if that was Ruben Diaz, Ollie Watkins would do him. If that was John Stones decent in those situations, but still, he's not rapid on his feet. He's not quick moving like a fullback. So again, I just think you shouldn't be exposing Quansah in that way. And that I spoke around the first goal, didn't I? The fact that McAllister tries to kill a pass, and then all of a sudden Quansah's in a situation that he absolutely shouldn't be in. Again, I almost don't think that we should be putting blame at Quansah's door for that one. And he does what he can in terms of slowing Watkins down. And there should be someone tracking the runner, by the way, from midfield who arrives. It's his Tielemans. So again, I actually don't want to put too much blame on Quansah for that situation. He shouldn't be being put in that scenario, really. And he does try his best to slow it down. Maybe someone else should be able to help him out as well by tracking a runner and digging him out of a hole that he didn't put himself in at all. So, and I thought his game otherwise was largely decent. Won his duels. I thought, again, a lot of the problems were just kind of in front of him rather than anything he was doing wrong. And scores a really, really good goal, which again, if your centre halves can add goal threat as well as everything else, the fact he's only 21 and he's got this package that he's offering already, very, very exciting. And I don't really hold any of the goals against him last night, which I know he was involved around the first one, but again, I think it was another good step forward for him, and to get that first Premier League goal, so early, and it's a really good finish as well. I'm still really encouraged by Quansah, and again, it's another one who you think exciting to see what you can do in a new era under a new manager.
It's funny, you forget the story of this season because there's always that recency bias, probably the right way of putting it. How many times this season have we relied on Konate and VVD to bail us out, when we've left them 2-on-2 and there's an emergency situation? It's only because they've got that acceleration or physicality to bail us out quite often. Whereas for all his talent, he's not quite there, Quansah, is he? We can't expect him to be. So in that situation, if we keep exposing him, it is going to happen eventually, isn't it?
That's it. So that's something we got to think about is sort of protection and maybe being more cautious in possession is one way to do that, and just trying to stop counters. And don't get me wrong, there's been plenty of situations where Quansah has been put into sort of scenarios where he is defending 1v1 and done very well. But the thing is that should be a last resort rather than something that keeps happening during games. And so, that again, it comes down to how you design your system and how you set up. And I think we've seen some weaknesses of that in recent weeks. Absolutely.
Yeah, is that consistent theme? And speaking of consistent theme, we were 4-0 up against Spurs. A load of subs came on and 2 goals were conceded quickly. Rinse, repeat, 4 subs this time, all which I think we were kind of surprised as more just kept coming off the bench. And 4 came on. It wasn't all just the subs, but we've got to look at it, haven't we, as another concern that this many subs, it just seems to unbalance us. Not that we're balanced to start with on last night, but probably not the best sort of substitution making, shall we say?
Yeah, I think it's just disrupting rhythm. And the fact is that I kind of probably don't want to read too deeply into that, because I think the reality is that Jurgen wouldn't probably be doing that if, it wasn't this point in the season, Liverpool weren't playing for anything. He wouldn't probably be making 4 subs and changing the rhythm of the side and completely making it disjointed. So I don't think it's anything he would repeat. It wouldn't matter if it was anyway, because he's going. But yeah, there's no doubt that sort of has disrupted Liverpool when he's done it in the last couple of games. And I think it's all about just trying to get players on the pitch who have trained well, but not quite maybe got into the 11 or whatever. So, it's not one I'm too concerned about, to be honest.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
Fair enough. And I mean, the one thing that did strike a lot of people, which is natural, I'm sure you thought as well. I mean, Diogo Carlos now rivals Ronnie Rosenthal for the worst miss in this fixture. That goes across. Diaby missed chance. I mean, it comes down to that openness, but on another night, I mean, Villa's XG was nearly 4, wasn't it? They had a lot of chances again. But is it just down to approach? Because we kept seeing it. Nothing changed, did it? We never at one point tightened up. Villa still just a bit like Liverpool, kept wasting chances, didn't they, in this game?
Yeah, and again, just sort of comes down to, again, I just think not enough pressure on the ball in midfield, too easy to clip a ball in behind, and once that happens, you're in real danger. So, Villa have got pace, they've got quality as well. So if you don't put pressure on that first pass, they are going to be good enough to just clip one in behind you, and then you're in serious trouble. So that just kept happening again and again, and that's why you can't really be too upset about the way that the goal goes in off John Duran, because that's lucky in that moment, but ultimately Villa deserved it on the basis of the performance and the way they were hurting Liverpool. And I think it's clear, isn't it? Liverpool didn't have a lot riding on the game. Villa very much did with Champions League qualification. So and I do think we've spoken about Liverpool's fatigue, haven't we, before, about that being a factor in recent performances, and it's still definitely there. And then you throw in the subs as well and the disjointedness, in the later part of the game. So it's a combination of factors really, but the defending hasn't been very good recently. The ability to get pressure on the ball, and again, it's something for the managers to solve when he comes in. Big pre-season, got to get things tactically right to to ensure that Liverpool are a lot less open? Because Liverpool can be a decent side when they're playing in the way they have this season, but can they be one that wins the title or challenges for the Champions League? I don't think playing this style of football now.
No, it all feels a bit 17-18, didn't we, when we scored loads of goals but conceded, which ultimately doesn't translate to the biggest trophies, does it? You need a good defence.
Hopefully, though, we're in that as part of the process, or so to speak, and then next season will be 18-19, so we'll see how that goes.
Fingers crossed that is the leap. And I do want to touch upon a player. I don't want to be too harsh on him, but you mentioned it before, and it is right. I mean, Alexis McAllister was at fault for a number of the goals, and he has really struggled. Again, it seemed last night, I mean, the first goal he plays a part, but when Endo comes off, and it's not just Endo, but McAllister back into that six, I mean, it seems to go pretty disastrously. We're just giving Alexis McAllister a free pass because of what he's done this summer, but is this almost the end of the six debate for Alexis McAllister, do you think?
I honestly don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what Slot thinks. It'll be interesting actually to see whether he goes to the double pivot or not, because again, that's going to be a really interesting tactical question for him to solve. Does he have the profiles to go with a double pivot? If not, does someone leave? How does he reconfigure that midfield? I think it's a really sort of interesting debate. But again, I think McAllister's no question that, whether he's in the six or not, I didn't think he played well across the 90 minutes yesterday. I was kind of surprised he stayed on the pitch. And I do think, he's another one that fatigue looks like it's setting in. I think he was a yard off the pace in his pressing yesterday. So it was a big reason why Liverpool looked kind of so open, even when Endo was on the pitch, and things then obviously completely collapsed when Endo went off. So I just didn't think he played well, and maybe hasn't for a couple of weeks or so. But he kind of carried the team, didn't he, in February, March time, and was absolutely one of the best players in the league at that point. So I think an up and down first season for him at Liverpool, but I think we've seen enough ups to know that if Liverpool get things tactically right, he's in a bit more of a solid midfield next season. It's a bit less porous. It's players are more set up to succeed than fail than they have been recently. Then, he's got absolutely quality written all over him. So, looking forward to seeing what more's to come from him, and not too worried about this finish of the season. It's shame he's not going to get a rest this summer and the Copa America's taking place, but nothing can be done about that really. And I'm still sure that regardless of that, he's got a massive role to play next season.
So it's interesting, for all the nervousness, maybe Arne Slot's looking at this and thinking, well, they haven't kept 10 clean sheets in a row. That's an unfortunate record to break. They do seem very open. There's probably an easy starting point for him in a way, isn't it? And we've kept talking about it, thinking if I can get this team solid, more compact, to conceding less, a lot of the other things are in the right direction, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's kind of a situation where Liverpool need a complete reset or six players to sort things out, or that all the midfielders are crap and it's never going to sort itself out. It's just a lot of it's about decisions and compactness and how it's set up. You can get more out of these players if they're just set up in the right way. And I'm not saying, Jurgen Klopp tactically can't get it right or anything like that. I just think it's kind of, maybe hearing the same message from the same voice for a while has sort of taken its toll on a lot of this team, and they're not carrying out his instructions as well as he might have hoped. So, but I think a fresh voice coming in, someone who we know values compactness, we will look to get that, back in the team. I think, all of a sudden you're going to see fewer big gaps in the team. You're going to make the distances to press shorter, and hopefully that will see the performance levels tick up a little bit, because it's not been bad at all as well. That the basis is definitely there, but I think 2 or 3 signings in the right positions, the right profiles, get a new manager in with a fresh voice, and hopefully he's the right man. And then from there, I think Liverpool are not a million miles up, but it does need that additional compactness coming in, a bit more defensive solidity in the team, maybe a little bit more patience, as I spoke about, and then I think Liverpool can have a good season next season.
Yeah, will be interesting to see. And off the back of that, the off the pitch stuff, that's been another quiet week, hasn't it? So there's appointments, people let go. So we'll go through this one by one. The biggest news, which kind of broke on Friday night, wasn't it? Michael Edwards is getting the band back together, as people are saying. Julian Ward's back. Marquez is now coming in. And it's important to say, if I'm reading it right, these are FSG hires, aren't they? They're not Liverpool hires specifically. And there's a lot of people talking that Liverpool are very much moving to that European style in the way they're setting up. Is that your understanding of these appointments and the model of the club adapting now?
Yeah, I think with the FSG appointments, it absolutely 100% relates to this idea of wanting a multi-club model. So anyone who's there in an FSG role, you've already got Richard Hughes as Liverpool sporting director. So his main port of call will be, looking after all those elements. And obviously David Wolfman will be his assistant sporting director as well. So that sort of stuff about the Liverpool, Liverpool-centric stuff, outside of the big picture stuff that Edwards will look after, that's all sort of looked after in-house. So I think very much that Julian Ward's role is going to be bigger than that. It's going to be looking to that multi-club model and installing the right people in charge there and sort of just generally overlooking things like, as I say, the big picture stuff at Liverpool. So I think maybe touching on some academy stuff and stuff that, you don't want Richard Hughes' remit to be too big as Liverpool sporting director. So as I say, some of the big picture stuff will get taken up a little bit higher than him and up to people like Ward. But I do think a lot of these appointments that are FSG based are very much thinking towards that multi-club model, which Liverpool are moving towards. So, there's going to be progress there, isn't there? And it'll be interesting to see what that sort of means.
Yeah, it was interesting, the word in the way they set it. And it almost sounds like the way they phrased it, Slot will report into Hughes on like a European style. And like you say, all feeding into that multi-club model. It is interesting. And there's always just the way these things work. Because we're talking about people coming in. Obviously, there's more going out. I know you've done both the exclusives on this. On the back of John Achterberg, Andres Kornemeyer will go as well. And Jack Robinson, the assistant goalkeeping coach, is set to leave. Now, I want to be careful how I phrase this, but it very much feels like the full end of Klopp's era, doesn't it? That's the way you're putting it in these changes, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to see it from the outside as sort of, Michael Edwards and Julian Ward left a couple of years ago, didn't they? And there was obviously some sort of discord there, some disputes. And now Michael Edwards is back. There's very much kind of it looks like a clearing of the house. Some of this is people wanting to go for new challenges, admittedly, but clearly there's sort of it almost feels like scores being settled. I don't really want to put it like that, but it kind of these people kind of maybe they're not willing to work together or whatever, but clearly there's big changes going on behind the scenes regardless. And I think it's interesting in terms of it's a clear break from the Klopp era and the control he had over things. I think FSG were right to give him that. And I think he justified it with what's, the signings he made in a lot of aspects. And also the fact that, Liverpool have got themselves back to where they want to be. They're in a decent position. They won a trophy this season. But I think, they're obviously FSG are going now back to a model that they feel more comfortable with. And it's clearly being headed up by Michael Edwards. And he obviously wants to get people in place who are people he trusts and who he considers are the right people for the role. So it's a lot of change, but I think that there's a potential downside in there in that it's, with each passing coaching staff member or fitness guru who leaves, it's another appointment that they've got to make. So there's an awful lot of work to do this summer. That's without considering, there may be some departures. There's going to be signings. Arne Slot's backroom staff isn't sorted at all. So there's just an awful lot. There's the contracts as well with certain players, so an incredible amount of work to get done, and you worry that some stuff's not going to be in place in time for the start of pre-season, which means Liverpool are immediately starting on the back foot. But clearly, if Michael Edwards and co are willing to lose so many figures who've been involved in the Klopp era, then they believe that the right route is to go down and get other people in and get fresh faces in. So they think that's right, then the real test is going to be how does that pan out for Liverpool? How does next season go? Can Slot hit the ground running? We'll have to see. But as I say, it's an awful lot they've got to do in terms of appointments between now and pre-season. And will they be able to do it in time? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there doesn't seem like there'll be many quiet weeks between now and the start of next season, the way it's working out. And an interesting one that I know you were at the press conference. They were asked about, there's the night with Jurgen Klopp coming up, isn't there, at the end of May? And he was asked about this specifically in the press conference. Let's say he probably gave it almost seemed a less than lukewarm response to it, didn't he, when he was said? And it was almost, and I took that phrasing from it, as long as I can do it, I'll do what they ask me to do, which doesn't sound that I'm bang up for this night out type of response. Was that what you were taking from it, that he's just kind of doing it because he's being asked in that regard?
To be honest, I know what you mean about that, and I kind of thought at the time, all right, Jurgen, bloody hell, got to try and sell tickets here, so just try and lift it a little bit. But I think what he was kind of trying to do really was to say, look, this wasn't my idea. It's not that I think people want to spend the night with Jurgen Klopp or whatever. I didn't mean to phrase it in that way, but you know what I mean. He's not the one who's organised it anyway. I think he was trying to sort of give that vibe, and he's more than happy to do it. Will wants to do that event with fans, but it's not that he's arrogantly gone to them and said we must do a big event at the arena that I'm the star of. I think that was sort of the message he was trying to convey. So I'm sure he will be up for it, and I'm sure it'll be funny and charming, and I'm sure it'll be a good night.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. And I'm saying this as I've not already gone in the ballot for tickets. So yeah, fingers crossed on that one as well. And I mean, this upcoming last week, it's going to be emotional for a start for so many reasons. It'll be interesting to see in the right way if almost Jurgen Klopp can hold it together a little bit on that last day. I mean, it always seems like we play Wolves on the last day of the season, whatever happens and whatever fixtures, wherever we are in the league, it always seems to be that case. One thing I was going to ask you, the last game of the season, do you as journalists look at the players like fans sometimes do and think, who's hugging everyone, who's saying the goodbyes? Are you looking at sort of body language on the last day of the season as fans do, or is it like, don't read that much into it?
Yeah, it's maybe worth a look, and maybe if a player's in tears or whatever, you can definitely read into that. But I think beyond that, it's kind of hard to say who's just waving at the crowd, who's waving goodbye. There's some players who may not know this is going to be the last game, or that situation's only going to rise when they get to the end of the season, and then offers start to come in and they think, is this the right time to move on? So some of them, as I say, maybe will not know yet, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see the ones who clearly do know that they're going to be going, and if we get any hints as to the ones who there are question marks over. And yeah, I'm sure we're keeping a close eye on it, but it's I'm sure there'll be people around me who are just in tears because Jurgen's leaving anyway, so
Yeah, I think there'll be the majority of the audience. And I mean, because we are at the end of the season, nothing's going to change in terms of how people award. Whoever's Liverpool's, in people's eyes, player of the season or young player of the season, that award's already in place. Nothing's going to change on the back of the Wolves game. And obviously people will even be looking like me. Who gets the golden samba this season from the supporters as well at the same time? So I suppose for you, kind of as we'll come into a season wrap later, but who are you thinking, if you give it, who is your player of the season and young player right now? It's not going to change, is it?
No, I think my player of the season is Van Dijk, which again, for Liverpool have been porous at times this season. I don't think it's had anything to do with him. I think he's been a great captain. He's got a trophy on board, scored the winner in that final. I think he's got a lot more to give still, even though he's sort of getting on in football terms. But I think he's been a really natural step up into that captaincy, and I think his performance levels have been excellent as well. So for me, he is player of the season, really. I think he's, there's been some elements of players who, not had that level of consistency that he's shown, and maybe been up and down at times, or they've been injured in the case of maybe Mo Salah, for example. So I just think Van Dijk's the one who's been clearly consistent and probably deserves that award. And as I say, the captaincy element comes into that as well. And in terms of young player, I think there's a couple really, isn't there? I mean, that are in the mix. So I have two or three really, but I think the one for me, I feel harsh on Harvey Elliott, who I'm a big fan of, but for me it's Jarell Quansah, because it's harsh on Harvey, but I expected this step up from him. I knew he was this good. I felt that we've seen signs of this come in, and that he was going to get more game time this season. Whereas Jarell Quansah, barely knew anything about him coming into this season. I knew he played in a little bit in League One, and I'd read that Joey Barton, spoke so highly of him, said that he's definitely going to the top. But even so, you don't think it's going to happen this soon. And for him to play the amount of minutes he has, at the level he has, in a position of centre half where it's so much of it is about experience, and he doesn't have that. I just think unbelievable, really, and for me that marks him out as the young player of the year. But obviously Elliott unlucky in that regard. Connor Bradley magnificent. Yeah. Even the others who are in and around it. Jayden Danns stepped up when Liverpool needed him, and McConnell similarly. So yeah, just loads of great performances from youngsters, and it's a really exciting time for the academy. But Jarell Quansah for me has been the star of that this season.
It's probably true. The success of the season, whatever it is, probably the academy, isn't it? Especially back to that final and how well they've done. And yeah, anyone before we go 10 men against Newcastle who saw Jarell Quansah come on, who was going to say this kid's going to do 2,500 minutes and be this good, was just lying. As we all know, it has been a meteoric.
Do you know
ride.
what? I'm exposing myself as an idiot here, but I remember tweeting at the time that Quansah came on saying I felt that was the manager sending a message to FSG almost to say, look, I need to strengthen. We've not got enough at centre half here, so. Shows you absolutely that I shouldn't be listened to. Maybe people should turn this podcast off. But also, it showed how wrong I was about him and how good he's been. Absolutely blown away by it. So yeah, what a young player he is, and he's already playing at an incredible level. Even more to come from him, which is remarkable, really.
Yeah, definitely one of the success stories. And I mean, we go to the questions from the viewers again, which can be filtered down. There were so many variations. You're going to be not remotely surprised by this. A lot focused around the multi-club, because with the Ward and the Marquez announcements, they kind of filtered into. There was an interesting one. There was excitement and worry. I want to ask you this way, David, because a lot were like, this is exciting, as in it must be close, otherwise they wouldn't be appointing these people. On the other hand, there was the signs of, is the recruitment and everything going to get split? As in, is there going to be too much focus on multi-club when Liverpool have got so much to do? I mean, is there any updates, and how do you see this one specifically?
I don't think there should be a split, because, as I say, the infrastructure is there at Liverpool to look after itself, isn't it? In terms of Richard Hughes is there, obviously David Woodfine as well. So Michael Edwards, I've no doubt, will have a hand in sort of guiding things in what is obviously going to be Slot's first summer in charge, and making sure that sort of transfer committee that they've got back together now sort of works and works smoothly and ensures that's okay. So I don't think there's any worry about there being a distraction from Liverpool in that regard. But I think in terms of the multi-club model as well, I don't know if it suggests it's close yet, but obviously I imagine that Ward and Marquez will maybe have a role to play as well in identifying the clubs that Liverpool are going to go for, the club or clubs that they'll go for going forward. And then obviously once that transaction goes through, it's then a huge job to put an infrastructure in place there. So, their big jobs completely outside of Liverpool, and they'll be allowed to give sole focus to that, maybe occasionally help out with Liverpool if it's ever needed. But, their main focus will be on that. And we'll just have to see how that kind of plays out. It's all kind of quiet at the moment in terms of which club it might be or what they're looking at. Maybe Michael Edwards will think they've got a little bit on with Liverpool at the moment to just maybe hold back until the summer's done and then start to move with it. But yeah, I'm sure we'll hear about that soon enough, and it'd be interesting to see how that works. And yeah, I hope it's not as kind of. I hope some of they can sort of mitigate some of the awful downsides which you can see in some of the multiple models that are going on at the moment. So yeah, I hope it's not quite as, if they have to do it, it's not quite as sort of offensive to me as some of the other ones are.
Seems crazy that about 2 months, or at parts of 2 months this summer, we know that Michael Edwards has been in talks with Chelsea and turned them down. Julian Ward was at Carrington, as it's known, a few weeks ago. But here we are, and we're talking multi-clubs. And there's always, I mean, you knew we weren't going to get away without some transfer talk or some contract talk as ever this week. The big story, I'm sure you've seen it. If it is even a big story, if you think that Romano and a few others have specifically mentioned Trent and Real Madrid, that seems to be a hot topic across the transfer news right now. Is it, again, just a case of the old messages, we just need to wait and see, and what will be, will be?
Yeah, I've absolutely no doubt that's true, by the way, that the Real Madrid are interested in Trent, but whether it becomes sort of a concrete topic of discussion is totally something else. Obviously, Liverpool have been waiting until the summer, really, to get into those contract talks, rather. And that's something that's going to have to, take place from the summer onwards. But it's... it's an interesting one. They've got themselves in a dangerous situation with Trent, haven't they, getting down to this final year? That is not ideal. And I totally understand it in the case of Salah and Van Dijk because of their ages. That's totally excusable. But with Trent, absolutely not. Someone who has publicly said about wanting to be the club captain. I do wonder if he'll think, is he a little bit? I just think it's as much as he probably wants to be Liverpool captain as well. There will be that little niggle in the back of his mind that Bellingham's having such a nice time in Real Madrid. There's still Manchester City knocking about in England, who basically just seem to seal off all trophies available, and winning the league sort of isn't an option when that's happening. So, I'm sure it's something that'll be weighing up. No doubt about that. But I think the fact there hasn't been sort of talk from his side of, he wants reassurances from Liverpool, that kind of talk ends up in the papers if he's thinking about going. And I think we haven't seen anything like that yet. So I'm kind of encouraged by that. And I think I still lean on the side of that he's probably just going to sign a new contract at Liverpool. That's something that will get sorted. They'll be desperate to sort it, and so it will. I'm still quite positive about that one. Not kind of worried. But if we get to the end of the summer and it's not sorted, that will maybe start to ring alarm bells.
Yeah, I think that'll probably be on Michael Edwards' docket somewhere, not to let arguably your three best or most influential players get to a year of their contract. I don't think you'll be seeing that, hopefully, again in the future. And the final question, just because it seems right to ask it this week and save this till last specifically, it is Jurgen Klopp's last week of his tenure at Anfield. And everyone's going to have a favourite sort of Klopp memory, something that's sort of personal to them for various reasons. What is your favourite sort of Klopp memory of all the interactions or things you've had with him for the team, whatever it may be?
Yeah, honestly, so many sort of I can think back to, but I think probably number one, and one that I'll want to tell your kids about, and one I'll always sort of relish was sort of being in the mix zone in Madrid after Liverpool had won the European Cup, and he walks up and spots me and straight over and gives me a big Klopp hug, and you kind of like, that's just from the Liverpool manager after he won the European Cup. And yeah, it's kind of a bit of a magic moment, that, and yeah, something I'll never forget. And yeah, just magic really. And again, these are kind of the moments I'll take with me forever when he leaves now. And yeah, that makes it kind of sad he's going, because he's been you reflect on the personal in these situations, as sort of egotistical as that is. You can't help it. And I think, as much as it's significant for everyone, it kind of, you do end up reflecting on the personal. And I can't, 8.5 years, so many sort of personal milestones I've been through in that time. And you attach it to the things that Klopp has done at Liverpool as well. And to be able to be close to that has been a real privilege, and to be able to interact with him and know him as a person has been, as I say, a privilege. And yeah, quite sad to see him go, really. And it's going to be an emotional one on Sunday, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the football secondary, that's the main thing, isn't it? It's going to be emotional. It's going to be a heck of a send-off. And at the same time, it is the final game of the season, which means soon enough, it will be the final Media Matters review for the season as well. So all that leaves me to say for the penultimate time is, David, thank you for your time and your insight as ever. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gents, that was another Media Matters by Anfield Index.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at anfieldindex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index, and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.